At exactly 3:47 a.m., the piercing sound of an ambulance sliced through the quiet night of the pediatric emergency wing at St. Elora Hospital. Isabel Quinn, the head night nurse, had just finished taking a newborn's temperature when hurried footsteps echoed down the corridor. She barely had time to glance up before the double doors burst open. A stretcher rushed in, flanked by 3 paramedics whose faces were drawn tight with urgency. Lying on the stretcher was a little girl, no older than 6. Her face was ashen, lips a bruised shade of blue. One of the paramedics shouted, voice cracking, "Near drowning! Found unconscious in the backyard pool." The world seemed to still. Isabel dropped the clipboard without hesitation and ran forward. She didn't need to know who the child was. That wasn't important. But as she slipped on her mask and leaned closer, her heart skipped. It was Luna Wallace, the only daughter of Nathaniel Wallace, tech magnate, magazine cover regular, the man whose name moved markets. But in that moment, all Isabel could see was a child on the brink of vanishing right in front of her. Isabel motioned for the team to move the girl into the resuscitation room. Her voice rang clear, firm. "Prepare adrenaline, open the airway. I need a pulse oximeter, now." No one asked questions. The team moved in rhythm with her breath. Luna lay motionless, her skin void of life. Isabel grasped the girl's wrist, small, cold, unresponsive. No pulse? Time contracted. She called out, "Begin CPR, 1, 2, 3. Chest compressions echoed with each count. Still, no response. "Administer adrenaline," she instructed. A nurse pushed the syringe. Isabel continued the compressions, her eyes fixed on the monitor. Just a flat, unforgiving line. Sweat trickled down her back. 1 second, 2, a faint beep, then another. Everyone froze. Isabel stared at the screen. Waves. The heart rhythm appeared. Faint, but there. "She has a pulse," a doctor said softly, almost not believing it. No one spoke further. The room exhaled all at once, relief breaking through the tension. Isabel didn't release Luna's hand. In that moment, she was no longer just a nurse, but someone holding another soul back from slipping away. She knew one thing: from this point forward, nothing would ever be the same again. Isabel was still beside Luna's bed when the door opened. He stood there, tall, always composed, now unraveled by fear. The man who graced financial covers now looked like any father, tie half untied, eyes hollow, searching for his child. Nathaniel Wallace. For a moment, the room held its breath. His presence crackled like static. No one dared to speak. "Where is she?" he asked, voice low and hoarse. Isabel turned, still holding Luna's hand. "Pediatric ICU. She's stable, but the next 48 hours are critical." Nathaniel moved closer, his eyes locked on his daughter like he was afraid she might vanish again. "You've been with her since she arrived?" She nodded. "I haven't left her side." He looked at her, for the first time, not through her, not as a stranger, but like he was searching for something in her. A reason not to fall apart. Isabel didn't flinch. "Thank you," he said, barely above a whisper. She nodded and stepped back, leaving him alone by Luna's side. She didn't know that in that moment, when their eyes met for the first time, something had cracked open inside a man who thought he feared nothing. The 2 days after the resuscitation passed slowly, as if time itself didn't want to move forward. Inside the pediatric ICU, Luna lay still beneath the wires and machines, her life reduced to numbers and the faint rhythm of a fragile pulse. Isabel stayed, not out of duty, but something deeper, an instinct, or maybe a silent bond that had sparked the moment that tiny hand wrapped around hers. She came in at the start of her shift and stayed even when she wasn't on duty. She'd brought a small bag with storybooks, crayons, and even an old stuffed bear she had kept since childhood. Luna didn't say much, but every time Isabel walked into the room, her eyes brightened slightly, and her heart monitor showed a rhythm just a little steadier. One afternoon, with golden light spilling in through the window and painting the sterile room with softness, Isabel sat by the bed, reading a book about stars that grant wishes. Her voice was calm, low, like the sound of waves lapping at a shore. Suddenly, Luna reached for her hand. "You'll stay, right?" Isabel paused, then smiled. "Only if you don't tell me to leave." Luna slowly shook her head. Then, "Don't go." That moment was small, but Isabel knew it was an invitation, a rare opening from a child who'd seen too much emptiness. Outside the glass wall, Nathaniel stood motionless, hands in pockets, his gaze fixed. He didn't say a word, but he didn't need to. He saw it clearly. Isabel had become the first anchor his daughter had reached for since everything fell apart. That night, Isabel received a message from an unknown number. "Thank you for being there as if no one had to ask you to be." No name, but she knew who it was. From then on, she and Nathaniel fell into a new rhythm, not romantic, not close, but something shared, a silent understanding only people who've walked through loss can recognize. They spoke during bandage changes, in the hallway, sometimes just a nod by the vending machine. One afternoon, while waiting for Luna's new lab results, Nathaniel asked quietly, "Why did you choose this line of work?" Isabel looked at him, then down at her hands. "Because I lost someone I couldn't save. My little brother. Car accident. I was 18. Since then, she had built walls made of routines and silence. Her world had no room for attachments. Until Luna placed a hand in hers without asking permission. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I get it. My wife, Clara, passed from cancer when Luna was 3. I didn't know what being a father meant. I just knew I had to try." Neither tried to fix the other's pain. They let it sit between them. No pity, no platitudes. And in that silence, beneath the steady beeping of a heart monitor, something had quietly taken root. A connection not rushed, but deep enough to make two people stay when they didn't have to. They weren't in love. Not yet. But something in the way they stayed, without promises, without excuses, began to carve out space where love might grow, slowly and without noise. The rumors began like all rumors do, thin as smoke but quick to spread through the hospital halls. "The night nurse and Mr. Wallace, there's something going on. I heard she's moving into his mansion." Someone like her? What could he possibly see? Isabel walked past the sideways glances and half-turned heads. The words were never spoken to her face, but clear enough to sting anyway. Nathaniel heard them too. He never said much about it, but she knew. One morning, as Isabel was filling out patient charts, Clara, Nathaniel's former sister-in-law, showed up. She was tall, sharp, and cold as early frost. "I hear you've gotten close to my niece," Clara said without a smile. "Luna trusts me," Isabel replied calmly. "Children trust fairy tales too. I don't." The words cut like glass, quiet but sharp. Nathaniel didn't let it slide. "You don't get to decide who's in Luna's life," he told Clara later. His voice wasn't raised, but his stance left no room. "And if you think you can push Isabel out, you're mistaken." Still, even with his protection, Isabel began to feel like she didn't belong. Not because of Nathaniel, but because she started to doubt herself. She was a nurse. He was a man who carried an empire on his shoulders. Luna didn't care. But what about the world outside that hospital door? The invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, calm, as if nothing monumental was waiting just beyond the envelope. The logo of San Andrea Children's Hospital in Florence sat neatly in the top corner. It was an offer of significance to lead a pediatric emotional support initiative, working alongside specialists from all over Europe. Why had they chosen her? "We've heard of your ability to connect with young patients," the letter said, "especially a recent case, a little girl named Luna Wallace." Isabel read that line over and over, her heart tightening. Luna. The name felt like it had been carved into the softest part of her chest. For days she didn't tell anyone, not out of secrecy, but because she couldn't quite call it good news. She told Nathaniel one soft afternoon when Luna was napping, her small hand curled over a teddy bear, her breath steady. Isabel spoke as if her own voice might disturb something delicate. They offered me a position in Florence. They want me to lead a new program. Nathaniel didn't respond right away. Florence, he repeated quietly, like he was trying to map the distance emotionally. What do you think I should go? She asked. Still silence. Then, finally, I think you've given so much to others. If this is for you, then yes, take it, even if my heart isn't ready. The silence between them was fragile, heavy enough to feel, light enough to crack. And if I go, what happens to us? That question, so soft, yet heavier than any she had asked before. That night, Isabel sat alone with two envelopes, one with the signed contract ready to send, the other a letter to Luna. No address, no closing words yet. She didn't cry. She simply exhaled, because she understood that some choices aren't born from a lack of love, but from a deep need to continue existing for yourself. She loved them, but she was also a woman who had silenced her dreams for too long, and now they were calling her. Not as Nathaniel's partner, or the nurse who saved Luna, but as Isabel Quinn. Isabel left on a morning without rain. Luna hugged her tightly at the hospital door. "Will you come back?" the girl asked, her eyes holding a whole sky. "I'm not disappearing. I'm just going to help other kids like you," Isabel answered, steadying her voice. Florence welcomed her with soft sunlight, a small cozy apartment, and a job that made her feel like she was truly making a difference. But every night, when she turned off the lights, there was still a silence lying beside her. And sometimes, it had a name. 2 months later, while Isabel was updating notes in her office, the hospital director summoned her. Inside the room stood a man, messy hair, travel-worn coat. "I'm Oliver Wallace, Nathaniel's brother," he said. "I'm here because he can't be." Isabel froze. He was in a car accident, not life-threatening, but he hit his head hard. When he woke up, he didn't ask about the hospital, the car, or even Luna. She swallowed. What did he ask? Just one name. "Yours." He said, "Isabel." She didn't need another second to think. The next morning, she boarded the earliest train from Florence back to the city she left behind. She left her apartment with a single overnight bag, the job in Florence still waiting, paused, not abandoned. No suitcase, no schedule, just a heart that had already chosen where it needed to go. Nathaniel had been discharged 3 days ago, after doctors confirmed the head injury left no serious complications. He returned home but refused to see anyone, not even his own brother. Isabel only learned that after stepping off the early train, greeted by a cold wind and a certainty she couldn't explain. She hadn't texted. She hadn't called. She simply knocked on the Wallace door. It was Luna who opened it. She stood still for a second, then let out a cry and threw herself into Isabel's arms, as if the months apart had only been a long, strange dream. "Dad's upstairs, but I knew you came for him." Isabel nodded, squeezing the little girl's hand before walking up the stairs. The room was dim, curtains still drawn. Nathaniel lay on the bed, head bandaged, eyes unfocused. Until he saw her. "I didn't know if you'd come." "I didn't either," Isabel whispered. "But I did." She sat beside him. They didn't say much more. They didn't need to. After a while, Nathaniel took her hand. "I'm sorry I didn't ask you to stay." "Thank you for not asking," she replied, "because now I know. I stayed even when I left." That night, they didn't touch promises. They didn't make plans. They just sat quietly, letting presence do what words could not. The next morning, Luna made breakfast for the three of them. While setting the table, she asked, "Are you staying with us?" Isabel bent down, brushing the girl's hair. "I'll always stay, even if there are times you can't see me. Because love doesn't need to be near to be real." Luna nodded, like it was something she had always known. And so they began again. No labels, no titles, just 3 people choosing each other, one day at a time. One still afternoon, they walked along the beach. The waves whispered gently, and the late sun lingered like it had waited just for them. Nathaniel paused, his fingers still laced with Isabel's. "Have you ever thought about getting married someday?" Isabel smiled, not rushing her answer. "Never really thought about it, not because I didn't want to, but because no one ever made me want to." Nathaniel nodded slightly, then pulled a small box from his pocket. No kneeling, no fairy tale speech. Just a thin silver ring engraved on the inside. "I chose you in silence. I love you out loud." "I'm not promising perfect," he said. "Just that I want to stay, if you'll let me." Isabel looked at him, then at the ring. She didn't cry, but something in her chest softened, loosened, like the final thread of fear had untied itself. "I say yes," she whispered, "not because of the ring, but because for the first time I feel chosen, not for what I do, but for who I am." They were married on a Sunday morning in a small garden where the lavender still held dew and the light filtered through the trees like golden threads. There were no professional cameras, no choir, no dramatic gown, just close friends, a few loved ones, and one little bridesmaid, Luna, dressed in a simple white dress, holding a small bouquet Isabel had tied herself. She walked between them, holding both their hands. She didn't need anyone to explain. She already knew this was the day her family would finally have a name. Isabel wore a soft cream dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. Nathaniel wore a blue tie, his hand slightly trembling as he held the ring. Their vows were short. "I don't promise life will be easy, but I promise I won't leave. I don't promise I'll always be strong, but I promise I won't walk away alone." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the three of them hugged. Luna rested her cheek on Isabel's stomach and whispered, "So now we're a real family, right?" Isabel smiled. "We've always been a family, even before today." A year later, the small house just outside the city held 3 toothbrushes, a framed photo by the entrance, and muddy little shoes lined up next to Nathaniel's polished ones. Isabel still worked in Florence, but she was no longer alone. Every weekend, Luna and Nathaniel visited. They cooked together, did homework, read stories. Like this was always the way things were meant to be. No one had to say, "We're a family." They already were, by choice, by patience, by not walking away. One evening, as Luna fell asleep on the couch, Nathaniel leaned in close and whispered into Isabel's ear, "I love you more than the first time I said it." She didn't answer right away, just smiled and reached for his hand. Outside, the city kept moving, but inside that home, love didn't need to shout. It only needed to be held onto, a little more each day, and in that quiet, they kept building something real. One morning, one story, one choice at a time. And maybe, years from now, Luna would look back and say, "It all began the night someone refused to let go."